Imagine this. The sun is directly above you. Not warm, not hot, violent. The ground beneath your sandals isn't just burning your feet, it's beginning to cook them. You smell something strange. Not smoke, not fire. Meat. Human meat. And then you realize, it's coming from your own army. Men are screaming. Not war cries. Not courage. Just raw, animal panic. And somewhere in the distance, unseen, silent, the Persians are watching. Here's the impossible question you've probably never asked. How did an army that conquered the known world, led by the greatest military genius in history, end up being slow roasted alive by sand? And why was this part almost erased from history? You think this is going to be another heroic Alexander story. It isn't. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear includes 5 moments so insane that ancient historians themselves argued whether they should even be written down. A moment when Macedonian veterans begged to die quickly instead of marching one more step. A moment when Alexander himself nearly collapsed, not from wounds, but from fear. A forgotten Persian commander who turned nature itself into a weapon. A battlefield with no visible enemy, only heat, thirst, and madness. And finally, a revenge so brutal that even Alexander's own men would whisper about it years later, voices low, eyes averted. But first, you need to understand something. Alexander's army was not supposed to be here. By the time this nightmare begins, Alexander of Macedon is already a legend carved into flesh and bone. He has smashed the Persian field armies. He has taken Babylon without a fight. He has broken Darius, the so-called King of Kings, and chased him like a wounded animal across Asia. Every soldier marching behind him believes the same thing. Nothing can stop us. Not men. Not cities. Not empires. But belief has a weakness. It doesn't protect you from the sun. Picture yourself as a Macedonian infantryman. You've marched for years. You've crossed rivers under arrow fire. You've climbed city walls slick with blood. You've seen friends die screaming beside you. And you kept going, because Alexander was always there, helmet flashing, eyes burning, leading from the front. Now imagine the terrain changes. No forests. No rivers. No shade. Only endless sand stretching to the horizon, shimmering like molten metal. This is the Persian heartland's cruel secret. The desert is not empty. It is hostile. The Persians knew this. Alexander didn't. Not yet. The plan seemed simple. Push deeper. Crush remaining resistance. Secure supply lines. Finish the conquest. But the Persians had learned something devastating from defeat. You cannot beat Alexander head-on. So you don't fight him. You let him walk into hell. The march begins under a sky that looks bleached white. The kind of light that flattens everything, steals depth, makes distances lie to you. Water skins feel lighter every hour. Lips crack. Tongues swell. Men start to ration sips, then drops. And then something strange happens. The sand starts to change. At first, no one notices. But by midday, soldiers begin lifting their feet faster, yelping, stumbling. The ground isn't just hot anymore, it's alive with heat. Sand grains burn through leather soles. The smell of scorched leather fills the air. One soldier, let's call him Nicanor, a veteran from Pella, falls to his knees. He thinks he's fainting. But when he tries to stand, his hands blister instantly. The sand sears his palms like a brazier. Men laugh nervously at first. Jokes. Gallows humor. Then someone screams. Not from an arrow. Not from a sword. From the ground. The sand has been deliberately prepared. Darkened. Compacted. Spread wide in shallow basins where heat accumulates. Under the sun, it becomes an oven. A silent one. Persian scouts had stripped vegetation, flattened dunes, turned pathways into heat traps days in advance. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan. And Alexander has just marched his army straight into it. You think this is bad? Wait. By the second day, men start collapsing, not dead, not wounded, just gone. Eyes unfocused. Speech slurred. Heat stroke takes them silently. Companions try to drag them, but the effort kills 2 men instead of 1. Alexander orders forced marches at night. But the sand doesn't cool. It holds the day's heat like a curse. Boots melt. Horses refuse to move, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling white. One cavalryman tries to force his mount forward and gets kicked in the chest, ribs shattering like pottery. And still, no enemy appears. That's the worst part. There are no banners to charge. No lines to break. No victory to seize. Just heat. And fear. This is where our first real human story cuts through the legend. A young Persian officer, let's call him Artaban, stands on a distant ridge at dawn. He isn't wearing armor. He's wearing linen, light and loose. He watches the Macedonian column below, distorted by heat haze. He doesn't hate Alexander. He respects him. That's why he's here. Artaban has been ordered not to attack. Not to harass. Only to observe. To report. To make sure the trap stays closed. He watches men fall. He watches officers argue. He watches Alexander himself ride up and down the line, shouting, encouraging, lying with confidence. And Artaban whispers to himself, "Let the sun finish what swords could not." Back in the column, discipline begins to crack. Water theft becomes a capital crime. And yet it happens anyway. One night, a soldier is caught cutting another man's water skin. He's beaten unconscious by his own unit before officers can intervene. The taste of fear is dry and metallic. Alexander calls a council. His generals, men who have survived Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela, are shaken. Not panicked. Worse. Quiet. They warn him. The desert is killing us faster than any army. Alexander listens. Then he does something that surprises even his closest companions. He drinks less. When a helmet full of water is brought to him, melted ice carried from miles away, he pours it onto the ground. In front of everyone. You can hear men swallow. Not in admiration. In agony. It's a gamble. A psychological one. He's saying, if I endure this, you must endure it too. But morale is not hydration. And the Persians know something Alexander still doesn't. The worst is yet to come. Because this desert doesn't just burn from above. It burns from below. The Persians have chosen this ground for a reason older than empire. In the next part, you're going to witness the moment when sand becomes a weapon of mass execution, when men are cooked alive without a single blade drawn, and when Alexander finally realizes, too late, that this march may end his legend forever. And just when it seems like the story is over, it isn't. Because this is only the beginning. You wake before dawn because the heat never lets you truly sleep. Your mouth tastes like dust and old copper. Your tongue feels too big for your mouth. When you try to swallow, there's nothing there. Just dryness scraping dryness. Around you, men are already awake, not because they're rested, but because lying still feels like dying faster. Somewhere in the dark, a man is praying. Somewhere else, another is sobbing quietly, the kind of crying you only hear when someone believes no one is listening. And then the sun rises. Not gently. Not slowly. It explodes over the horizon like a thrown torch. The sand beneath you, which never truly cooled, ignites again. Heat climbs through your sandals, into your bones. Every step feels like walking on iron pulled straight from a forge. This is the moment Alexander begins to understand. This isn't a bad march. This is a trap designed by people who know this land the way sailors know the sea. The Persians aren't hiding because they're afraid. They're hiding because they don't need to show themselves. You think the desert is empty? It isn't. It's watching. Alexander rides at the front, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. He's lost weight. Everyone has. Cheekbones sharpen. Beards grow uneven and brittle. Sweat dries before it can drip. A messenger arrives from the rear, stumbling, barely able to speak. He reports that another supply mule collapsed. Then another. Then another. The meat spoiled before it could be cooked. The water leaked into the sand. Alexander says nothing. Silence from him is worse than shouting. Then something changes. A shout ripples down the line. Not panic. Confusion. Men are pointing at the ground. You look down. The sand is darker here. Almost black in patches. It looks harmless. Fine. Soft. The first man steps into it. He screams instantly. Not a yelp. A full-throated, lungs-tearing scream. He jumps back, tearing his sandals off, but it's too late. The skin on the soles of his feet has blistered and split open like overcooked meat. Blood beads instantly, then dries. Others try to skirt the dark patches, but the column is too dense. Too long. Someone stumbles and falls forward. His hands hit the sand. You hear the sound before you understand it. A wet, cracking hiss. He pulls his hands up, and the skin comes with the sand, peeling back to raw flesh. He howls, thrashing, until two men drag him away, leaving smears of blood behind. This isn't random. This is engineering. The Persians have spread darker sand, iron-rich, heat-absorbing, over shallow depressions. Under the sun, it becomes lethal. Not instantly fatal. Worse. It cooks slowly. Inside armor, men feel like they're being boiled alive. Bronze greaves turn into branding irons. Helmets become ovens. Some soldiers tear their armor off despite discipline, despite orders, despite knowing they're exposed. And still, no enemy appears. You start to understand the real horror. There is nothing to fight. There is nothing to win. Only survival. Alexander orders the column broken into smaller units, spread wider to avoid concentrated heat zones. It helps a little. But it creates another problem. Isolation. When men collapse now, fewer people notice. And the Persians are watching that too. Let me tell you about one of them. His name is not recorded. History doesn't care enough to preserve it. But he was a Persian sapper, an engineer. A man who grew up learning where the ground breathes fire. He knew which sands burned hottest, which held heat longest, which would turn into a death trap under armor and leather. He didn't need glory. He needed patience. For weeks before Alexander arrived, he and others prepared the ground. Flattened dunes. Removed reflective stones. Spread heat-eating sand in corridors the Macedonians would be forced to use. No swords. No arrows. Just physics. And it's working. By midday, the screams stop, not because the pain ends, but because men no longer have the strength to scream. One collapses face first into the sand. Another trips over him and falls. A third tries to help and collapses too. A knot of bodies forms. Heat radiates from them. The smell hits next. Burnt hair. Burnt leather. Burnt flesh. It smells like a butcher's yard left too long in the sun. You gag. Others vomit, but there's nothing in their stomachs, so it's just dry heaving and bile. Alexander orders water redistributed. There isn't enough. Every ration is a moral decision now. Who drinks? Who doesn't? A young officer named Cletus, yes, the same man who once saved Alexander's life, begs him to turn back. Not argues. Begs. Alexander listens. And refuses. Because turning back means admitting weakness. And weakness, in this land, is death. This is where Act 2 truly begins, not with strategy, but with memory. Because as Alexander rides, his mind goes somewhere else. Back to Macedonia. Back to his father. Philip of Macedon was a brutal man. A brilliant one. He raised Alexander to believe that kings don't retreat. Kings endure. Kings break the world before it breaks them. Alexander remembers standing as a boy, watching soldiers train under the sun, punished for weakness, beaten for collapse. He remembers Philip's voice. If you show pain, they will smell it. Now, under this merciless sky, Alexander feels pain like he never has before. Not in his body. In his identity. Because the desert doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your lineage, your victories, your destiny. It treats Alexander the Great the same as any dying infantryman. That terrifies him. Another day passes. Then another. Men begin hallucinating. Some swear they see rivers ahead. Others hear voices calling their names. One soldier drops his spear and starts laughing uncontrollably, walking off into the heat until he collapses and doesn't get up. Alexander orders him dragged back. The man dies anyway. And then, finally, the Persians strike. Not with a battle. With a whisper. At dusk, as the sun finally loosens its grip, arrows begin to fall, not in volleys, not in ranks. Single shafts. From nowhere. They don't aim to kill. They aim to wound. An arrow punches into a thigh. Another into a shoulder. A third grazes a neck. Each wound bleeds. Each wound demands water. The Persians withdraw instantly. No pursuit. No engagement. Just enough damage to force the Macedonians to choose again. Who drinks? Who bleeds out? This is psychological warfare refined to cruelty. Alexander orders torches lit at night, hoping to spot movement. The Persians stay beyond range, invisible, patient. And then comes the night that breaks something fundamental. A sandstorm rises without warning. Not a dramatic wall. A suffocating blanket. Wind scours skin raw. Sand gets into eyes, mouths, wounds. Men wrap cloth around their faces and still choke. Tents rip apart. Fires die instantly. In the chaos, units lose each other. Shouts vanish in the wind. By morning, dozens are missing. Not dead. Missing. No bodies. Just footprints leading into nothing. This is the first false ending. Some men believe this is it. That the desert has won. That Alexander's legend will end here, erased not by an army, but by geography. Alexander calls the army together. What remains of it? He looks smaller now. Still commanding. Still intense. But human. He tells them they will march one more day. Just one. There is water ahead, he says. Relief washes through the ranks like a drug. Hope is a dangerous thing. Because the Persians know exactly how to weaponize it. Ahead, just beyond the horizon, the land dips slightly. The sand looks lighter. Reflective. Men begin to smile weakly. Water. They break formation, stumbling forward faster than ordered. And then they reach it. It's not water. It's salt flats. White, blinding, reflective enough to double the sun's fury. Heat rebounds upward, into eyes, into lungs. Men drop instantly. Some crawl forward, tongues lolling, trying to lick moisture that isn't there. Salt cuts cracked lips open. Blood mixes with dust. This is when Alexander finally understands the scale of what is facing. This isn't resistance. This is extermination by environment. And for the first time in his life, Alexander of Macedon feels something dangerously close to helplessness. But this story does not end here. Because desperation breeds innovation. And somewhere, buried under centuries of myth, there is a moment when Alexander does something so risky, so insane, that even his enemies hesitate. In the next part, you'll hear about the plan nobody believed could work, the first real blood spilled in this invisible war, and the single mistake the Persians make, the one mistake that allows Alexander's army to survive long enough to turn horror into vengeance. And when that happens, the desert will finally drink blood. But not Macedonian blood. Not anymore. By the time the sun sinks again, the army no longer looks like an army. It looks like survivors of a shipwreck scattered across a burning shore. Men sit with backs to each other because standing alone feels like dying faster. Armor lies abandoned in piles, too hot to touch, symbols of invincibility turned into liabilities. Horses stand motionless, heads low, sides heaving, eyes dull. Alexander walks. Not rides. He leaves Bucephalus behind because even his horse is suffering, and something inside him understands that distance from his men, now of any kind, is poison. He walks through them. He sees everything. Feet wrapped in bloody rags. Hands blistered and shaking. Eyes sunken so deep they look like they belong to skulls. No cheering now. No chants. Just the soft, constant sound of breathing, ragged, uneven, desperate. This is the moment his legend almost collapses. Because for the first time since he was a teenager, Alexander realizes something terrible. Courage is not enough. Discipline is not enough. Even genius might not be enough. He calls his remaining senior officers together in a shallow depression where the wind cuts slightly less. Their shadows are long and distorted, stretched across the sand like ghosts. They argue in low voices. Some want to turn back immediately, consequences be damned. Some want to split the army and gamble that at least one part survives. One man, older, quieter, suggests surrendering to the land. Dig in. Wait. Let the Persians come. Alexander listens. And then he does something none of them expect. He asks a question. Not about troops. Not about water. About sand. Why here? He asks. Not why the Persians attack here. Why they don't. The officers stare at him, confused. Alexander kneels. He scoops sand into his bare hand. Holds it. Feels it burn. Lets it fall. This ground kills us, he says quietly. But it feeds them. The officers still don't understand. So Alexander explains. The Persians aren't magic. They're not immune. They're human. Which means they must have water, shade, supply lines. They must be hiding somewhere this ground does not burn. Somewhere cooler. Somewhere stable. Somewhere they believe is invisible. This is the birth of the insane plan. Not to march forward. Not to retreat. But to go where no army would ever choose to go. At night. Into the dunes. The officers react instantly. It's madness. Dunes shift. They trap. They swallow men whole. There are no paths, no landmarks, no certainty. Marching an army through dunes at night is suicide. Alexander nods. Yes, he says. Which is why they won't expect it. This is the second false ending. Many officers believe this is the moment Alexander finally loses his mind. But Alexander has noticed something else. At night, the dunes cool faster than the prepared flats. They release heat. They become, relatively, merciful. The Persians avoided them because controlling heat traps in dunes is impossible. Which means, that's where their camps must be. Hidden behind the hell they built. Alexander orders the army stripped down to essentials. No heavy armor. No excess gear. Weapons, water, cloth. Wounded who cannot walk are given a choice. Some choose to stay behind. Some beg to be killed. Alexander does neither. He leaves small fires, decoys, fake camps, just enough to suggest the army has stopped, broken, resigned to death. Then, after full darkness, they move. Quietly. Slowly. The dunes are treacherous. Sand shifts underfoot. Men stumble. Some slide down slopes and must be hauled back up silently. Mouths fill with grit. Sweat chills, then dries. But they are not burning. For the first time in days, they are not burning. Hope returns, not loudly, not foolishly, but like a fragile ember. And the Persians miss it. Artaban, the observing officer from before, is watching the false camp when it happens. Fires still glow. Shapes still move. He reports nothing unusual. By the time he realizes something is wrong, the Macedonians are already hours into the dunes. This is where we meet our second human story from Alexander's side. A man named Ptolemy, not yet a king, not yet a historian. Just a soldier. He slips while climbing a dune and tumbles down, knocking the wind from his lungs. For a moment, panic seizes him. He imagines being left behind, buried by shifting sand, forgotten. Then a hand grips his arm. Alexander's. No words. Just effort. They climb together. That moment will live in Ptolemy's memory forever. He will write about Alexander's brilliance, yes, but this is when loyalty turns into something deeper. Shared survival. By dawn, the army crests a ridge. And there it is. Below them. Green. Not much. But unmistakable. Vegetation. And water. A Persian logistics camp, lightly guarded, positioned where heat dissipates and underground water can be accessed. The Persians believed it unreachable. They believed the desert protected it. Alexander doesn't hesitate. He attacks. This is the first blood. Macedonian soldiers fall on the camp like starving wolves. Persian guards are cut down before they can shout. Water skins are seized, smashed open, spilled over faces. Men drink until they vomit, then drink again. Some cry. Some laugh hysterically. Some just sit in the water and refuse to move. Alexander orders discipline restored with difficulty. He knows this is not victory. It's oxygen. And oxygen makes fire possible. They take prisoners. From one of them, Alexander learns the truth. This was not a single plan. It was a network. Multiple camps. Multiple heat zones. Multiple layers. The desert was meant to grind his army down until it collapsed entirely. And it almost worked. But now, the Persians have made their mistake. They assumed Alexander would react like every other commander. They assumed fear would force retreat. Instead, fear sharpened him. Alexander does something terrifyingly bold. He sends messengers back, through the dunes, to recall the men left behind. Not all will survive. But enough will. And then he prepares the counterstroke. He will not chase the Persians blindly. He will turn their weapon against them. He orders his engineers, those who are left, to study the camps. To understand how heat is controlled. How sand is prepared. How shade is created. He listens to locals. Prisoners. Anyone who knows this land. And slowly, an idea takes shape. If sand can cook men alive, it can cook Persians too. But first, Alexander needs them to commit. He needs them to believe the trap is still working. So he does something shocking. He marches back onto the burning flats. In daylight. From the Persian perspective, it looks like madness. From the Persian perspective, Alexander has learned nothing. Artaban watches again, relief washing over him. They're broken, he reports. The desert has them. The Persians move into position. They prepare the ground further. They spread more dark sand. They wait. And Alexander walks straight into it. This is the lowest point. Men scream again. Feet burn. Armor sears flesh. The smell returns. But this time, something is different. The Macedonians are watching the ground. Counting steps. Noticing patterns. The heat zones are not random. They are corridors. Which means there are edges. Safe lines. Alexander gives the signal. And the army shifts. Suddenly. Violently. Out of the corridors. Straight toward the Persian positions. The Persians react too late. They have relied on invisibility for too long. They are not formed for battle. They are spread thin. Alexander's men crash into them with the fury of survivors who have stared death in the face and lived. This is not a clean fight. It's savage. Spears punch into throats. Swords hack through linen and flesh. Persians try to flee, backward, into their own prepared ground. Into the heat. And now the sand does to them what it did to the Macedonians. They drop weapons, screaming as their feet blister and split. Some are trampled by their own comrades. Others collapse and burn. Alexander does not stop. He does not allow mercy yet. This is vengeance. This is teaching. By nightfall, the Persians retreat entirely. The desert is silent again. But now it is littered with Persian dead. Alexander stands over the ground, face streaked with sweat and dust, eyes hard. He has survived. But he knows something has changed. This land has wounded him. Not physically. Psychologically. And the Persians are not done. Because desperation breeds cruelty. And in the next part, you will hear about the moment the Persians escalate from environmental warfare to something even darker. How they attempt to erase Alexander's army completely. How a single forgotten trick saves the Macedonians from annihilation, and how the revenge that follows becomes so brutal that later historians will try to soften it, or skip it entirely. You think you know Alexander's story. You don't. Not yet. The desert does not celebrate victories. It absorbs them. By dawn, the battlefield looks the same as it always has. Sand, wind, silence. Except for the bodies half buried already, their outlines softened as if the land itself is trying to erase what happened. Alexander's men stand among the dead, breathing hard, hands shaking, not from fear now, but from something else. Rage, relief, and a dangerous sense of invincibility returning too soon. Alexander feels it too, and it scares him more than the heat ever did. Because he knows this isn't over. The Persians did not build a single trap. They built a system. And systems adapt. The prisoners taken in the night attack are brought before him. They are sunburned, terrified, dehydrated, but defiant in a quiet, resigned way. These are not elite soldiers. They are locals. Engineers. Guides. Men who know sand better than steel. Alexander questions them personally. Not shouting. Not threatening. Just listening. One of them finally speaks. Not out of loyalty. Out of inevitability. There is another place, the man says, voice hoarse. Worse than this. Alexander's jaw tightens. The man continues. A basin. Lower than the flats. No wind. The sand there doesn't release heat at night. It traps it. Even animals avoid it. Alexander doesn't interrupt. The man swallows. They are guiding you toward it. This is the moment the air changes. This is the moment Alexander understands the real endgame. The Persians don't want to defeat his army. They want to erase it. The basin is a kill zone designed not for engagement, but for disappearance. No witnesses. No survivors. Men would die there quietly, slowly, cooked from the ground up, bodies consumed by sandstorms and scavengers until nothing remained. No glorious defeat. No heroic last stand. Just absence. Alexander dismisses the prisoners and walks alone. He presses his palm into the sand again, feeling its heat, its patience. He realizes something chilling. This land doesn't fight like an enemy. It fights like a predator. And predators don't rush. Alexander gathers his commanders one last time. He doesn't frame it as strategy. He frames it as truth. If we follow the path they expect, he says, we die without being remembered. Silence. Then he says the unthinkable. We will go into the basin. Murmurs ripple through the group. Madness. Suicide. Alexander raises his hand. Not the way they expect. Here is the forgotten trick. The one almost no textbook mentions. The one that saves the army. Alexander orders the march delayed until the deepest part of the night. Not early night. Not late. The coldest window, just before dawn. He orders trenches dug at the basin's edge. Shallow, wide, irregular. He orders layers of sand scraped away to expose cooler sublayers. He orders shields laid flat on the ground, overlapping, covered with cloth and mud. His men don't understand. But they obey. This is the third false ending. Many believe they are preparing graves. And then Alexander does something that shocks everyone. He orders controlled fires lit, far away. Not near the army. Not as decoys. As signals. The Persians see them. They think Alexander is desperate. They think he is lost. They think he is moving into the basin blindly. So they commit. They move forces to seal the exits. They prepare the ground further. They wait for the sun. And Alexander waits too. When the army enters the basin, it is still dark. The sand is hot, but not lethal yet. Men move quickly, silently, guided into the prepared zones. When the first rays of sunlight crest the horizon, the basin begins to heat rapidly. Persian scouts watch from ridges. They smile. This is the moment. Then the Macedonians stop. They kneel. They lie down. They press themselves against the ground, against shields, mud, cloth, cooler sand. They don't march. They don't panic. They endure. The sun climbs. Heat builds. But something astonishing happens. The prepared layers slow the burn. Not eliminate it. Delay it. Just enough. Hours pass. Persian commanders grow uneasy. This isn't how it's supposed to go. Men should be screaming. They should be scattering. They should be dying. Instead, the basin is silent. Then Alexander gives the signal. The Macedonians rise. And they run. Not forward. Not back. Up. Toward the ridges. Toward the Persians. The Persians panic. Because now they are the ones on unprepared ground. They retreat instinctively, backward, into the basin they prepared. Into sand at full heat. Into death. What follows is not a battle. It is an execution performed by physics and fear. Persian soldiers drop weapons and tear at their boots. Some try to crawl. Some jump and scream. Others freeze, shock locking their bodies as heat overwhelms them. Macedonian soldiers chase only far enough to ensure the trap closes. Then they stop. They watch. This is the cathartic slaughter. Not glorious. Not heroic. Unforgettable. Alexander stands at the edge and does not look away. He forces himself to watch. Because he knows this is the cost of survival. By evening, the basin is a mass grave. The Persians are gone. Not routed. Not scattered. Gone. The desert takes them. The army survives. Barely. When the march resumes days later, something is different. The men are quieter. Harder. They no longer sing. They no longer boast. They have learned that conquest is not just defeating enemies. It is surviving the world itself. Years later, Alexander will conquer more lands. Win more battles. Be remembered as a god by some. But among the veterans, those who survived the burning sand, this is the campaign they never speak about loudly. This is the march that taught them fear. And respect. And something else. Limits. In the final part, we will confront the brutal aftermath, what Alexander ordered done to the region, how later historians tried to soften or erase this episode, and why knowing this story changes how you should see not just Alexander the Great, but warfare itself. Because sometimes, the most terrifying weapon in history is the ground beneath your feet. When the army finally leaves the basin, no one speaks. Not because they are ordered to be silent. Because there are no words left that feel honest. Boots crunch softly on cooling sand. The wind moves again, carrying the smell of death away, dispersing it into the endless horizon. The desert closes behind them like nothing happened. That is what terrifies Alexander most. The land remembers nothing. Men do. But history can be shaped. And Alexander understands this better than anyone alive. The march resumes, slower now. More cautious. Scouts range farther. Engineers study the ground before every halt. No one laughs when the sun rises anymore. The army survives. But it does not recover. Veterans carry injuries that never heal properly. Feet scarred, nerves burned, joints stiff from dehydration and heat damage. Some men lose teeth from grinding them in pain at night. Others lose sleep forever. Even years later, the smell of hot sand will make their stomachs turn. And Alexander is changed. He still leads from the front. Still fights. Still wins. But something has been carved into him. The desert took something it never gives back. Illusions. In the weeks that follow, Alexander orders reprisals. Not the kind celebrated in triumphal histories. Quiet ones. Villages suspected of aiding the heat trap network are emptied. Supplies are seized. Guides who mislead are executed without ceremony. Water sources are secured ruthlessly. Some are spared. Most are not. This is not cruelty for pleasure. This is Alexander ensuring this never happens again. Because he knows now, better than any king before him, that conquest does not end with armies. It ends with environments. Years later, historians like Callisthenes and later Roman writers will struggle with this episode. What do you call a battle where the enemy is mostly invisible? Where victory comes not from genius formations or heroic charges, but from crawling into the dirt and letting other men burn. It doesn't fit the myth. So they soften it. They turn it into a difficult march. They blame climate. They remove intent. Because intent makes it uncomfortable. Intent means Alexander was nearly defeated not by men, but by people who understood their land better than he ever could. And that doesn't sit well with legend. But fragments survive. Mentions of unbearable heat. Of soldiers collapsing without wounds. Of deserts that fought back. Enough pieces to reconstruct the truth if you know where to look. And now, you do. Because this story is not really about Persians. Or Macedonians. Or even Alexander. It's about something far more unsettling. War is not just decided by strength or intelligence. It is decided by who understands reality better. The Persians lost their empire because they fought Alexander the way empires always had, armies, kings, set-piece battles. But in the desert, they almost won by abandoning all of that. By letting go of honor. By weaponizing patience. By turning the ground itself into a silent executioner. And Alexander survived not because he was invincible, but because he learned. He learned when to endure, when to crawl, when to wait, and when to let the enemy's own certainty destroy them. Here is the final truth history rarely tells you. Alexander was not unbeatable. He was breakable. The desert proved it. But what made him extraordinary, what still separates him from almost every conqueror who ever lived, is that when he came closest to annihilation, he adapted. Most armies would have died screaming on that sand. Most leaders would have panicked, retreated, or vanished into obscurity. Alexander did something else. He watched. He suffered. He waited. And then he used the same cruelty that nearly killed him, better than his enemies ever could. That is not a heroic lesson. It is a human one. And now you know the real story, one that 99% of people will never hear. Not the shining statue. Not the flawless legend. But the moment when the greatest army on earth was almost cooked alive, and survived only by becoming just as ruthless as the land that tried to kill it. And once you understand that, you will never look at conquest, or history, or even the ground beneath your feet the same way again.